welcome to the Sacred Rainbow Warrior. Today is a really cool episode, actually. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is going through healing, and he asked me a really simple question, and it took me a few days to realize how profound it is because I never asked the question myself. The question was, what is healing? And so today I'm going to talk about what healing is, the elements of healing, methods and techniques that I have used to get to really deep healing. I'm going to talk about the ego and how part of healing is actually killing the ego. And then I'm going to finally talk about the secret of healing, the secret of healing all wounds, which is really profound. So let's dive on in. Number one, what is healing? Right. So on the thumbnail of this video, I created a woman and a man, and it looks like they're inside the blood, right? Now, this came up on my journey that everything in existence is like a yin and a yang. And between the black and the white that goes down the center is all the colors, which is the body. Now, the yin and the yang can be seen as the masculine and the feminine. And when you look at the different colors and the different opposites in life, you can understand how most of healing, of what healing is, always comes back to uh, wholeness. Because what healing actually is the reversal of separation. So if we take, for example, a cut, if I cut myself, the red blood cells and the white blood cells come together. The red blood cells are the feminine and the white blood cells are actually masculine. So I talk about this a lot and this is how deep I've been on my journey of healing. If I've actually gone into the blood and worked with the blood. And you can see this in Glastonbury actually, how they have the white spring, which is the masculine energy, and the red spring, which is the feminine energy. And you can also see how a man's when a man ejaculates, it's white, and when a woman bleeds, it's red, of course. And these elements really show the practicalities of healing on a really divine and profound spiritual level, and the roles of the masculine and feminine. And if you look at it, the feminine, the red blood cell is carries life. She carries the energy of life, and she's the natural healer. And the white blood cells, the masculine, he's the protector. He protects the blood and the body from foreign entities. And this is shown in so many, like, this is so multi-dimensional. You can start really small, you can go even smaller, but you can go outwards and outwards because everything is made in the image of love. So everything is made in God's image, right? And I don't mean that in a religious context. I mean that in everything shows itself in different avenues of creation through the three lines of consciousness. Sorry, I, we, us. And healing is the bringing together inside and outside those two parties that are in conflict. Now, so I'm going to go more into detail about on the inside because talk about healing ourselves first and foremost, because you can't fully love someone until you fully love yourself. And healing is about the bringing, like I said, the bringing together of two opposite sides. So when we look at that internally, and I'll go into the elements of healing after this. But if we look at this internally, separation is a form of betrayal. And the reason I say that is because if you look at my video on the Holy Grail, in order to receive the Holy Grail, I had to heal the wound, the separation wound, which goes back all the way back to the creation of existence, where I know it's really deep and profound, but this is the kind of energy that's hidden within our DNA. and it's all a memory that is held within the soul, which communicates with the DNA in the body. And when you're healing, you're activating and healing those parts. But you can do, massive chunks of healing by making really strong acknowledgements through what you're actually trying to heal, and bringing awareness to what you're trying to heal. But betrayal is the feeling that we feel when let's say the origin of existence, you could call that God or the goddess, but let's just call it the origin for now, that when the origin decided to know itself and split itself into two, that created the original sin of separation, which is extremely painful. But because it's so deep and so hidden, it's difficult to even acknowledge and feel that. That's why it takes such a long process to get that deep, to so many, getting rid of the ego and anything that stands in the way, to go that deep into your DNA to access that and heal that. And what we can do to understand healing better, what I'm going to do is talk about the different forms of, let's call them emotion for now, that create separation. So society is like a mirror for what happens inside us. So if you look at the separation, the obvious forms of separation are war, right? War creates separation. The illusion is that it's between men, but it's also between the masculine and the feminine. I'll go into more detail in that because, like I said, a yin and a yang, we have both energies within us. But as a man, I have a dominant masculine energy and a smaller feminine energy. And when we acknowledge that, that also creates balance. And one of the most toxic forms of separation is shame. And toxic shame, I'm referring to toxic shame, is I've said this before, the poster child for narcissism, because narcissism is toxic shame avoidance, and everything can be traced back to that. And everything that is promoted in society, like the news, is quite toxic. It's designed to trigger us into further separation. That's why part of my healing process was to stop watching the news, stop feeling guilty for that, and to focus on my own reality and my own coming together, my own healing, my own wholeness. Now, the obvious forms of separation are in relationships. How do we heal relationships? And what I find is that the healing of all relationships first comes back to taking time out to know your own energy so that you don't come into codependency. And codependency originates from loneliness, and it's different in the masculine, it's different in the feminine. And loneliness creates an entanglement, which then creates war, because when two energies don't know themselves and they come into contact with each other, and I'm talking about energetic, but also physical, it creates a mismatch of energy and a misunderstanding, miscommunication. And this is what shows itself in the collective. And this is war. Now, when we talk about healing, it's not just about healing the mind. It's absolutely not. Actually, it's quite the opposite. The mind really doesn't play a big part in all of this. It's about healing the soul. And the soul is infinite and multidimensional. So in order to heal that, it takes quite a huge amount of devotion. But when you understand the grounded basics of how to do that, it can be quite straightforward. So now I'm going to go into the five elements of healing to help you understand that. So the true element of healing comes from acknowledgement through action. And I'm going to speak more about this at the end because it's really profound. But if I um, help you understand the elements of healing, of how we're constantly working through these different elements, and I'll split them up to into separation so that we can understand what happens when we bring them together, right? So healing involves addressing all the aspects of an individual life. So mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and I'll go through them individually. So what have I got here? I've got air is the first one, which is mental health, water, emotional health, earth, nourishment, fire, physical action and movement, and spirit, love, consciousness. Now, I need to dive deeper into these because then you'll understand a bit more. But when we talk about the element of air, air is in the sky, air is inside, but air is a representation of the mind as well, right? So what I want to confirm with you and make uh, be stern about is that the mind isn't consciousness. The mind doesn't hold consciousness. The fact that, all our books and scientists say that the consciousness in the mind is complete nonsense because it's, I'm going to go into it later, but it's actually water. It's more inclined to emotion. So we should rarely be in the mind because the mind is supposed to be a humble servant to the mind because we're beings of love, but we've been conned. We've been conned. Like you look at mindfulness, it's a con. It's heartfulness we should be promoting because the mind is essentially toxic shame avoidance because it's when we're in our heart and the heart is very sensitive and we get shaken or afraid, it could just be watching a violent movie. We go into the mind, and the mind is a way of avoiding feeling and instead uses logic and definition and knowledge to say, oh, that's what it is without feeling it. It's a form of control. Control is the fear of not knowing. And when we are feeling in depth like that, the depths of feeling can stir up stuff that we have forgotten. They can stir up things like forgotten shame that are stuck in our DNA, lost memories, stuff like that. And so it's better to come into the mind. That is exactly that's what the ego tells us. The ego tells us it's better to come into the mind than to feel it, which is absolutely nonsense. You should do the opposite. Everything is designed in society because we know we live in a toxic patriarchy, a toxic society with a hidden toxic matriarchy. Don't worry, I'll acknowledge that. And the the triggers that are out there are all designed to trigger us into fear and separation, which activates the mind. Instead of acting out of thriving and making our dreams come true, it creates fear and distraction, and we all fall into survival mode, engaging in useless activities like watching the news, shopping, because consumerism is an emotional process of trying to fill the ego to stop it from complaining, but it's always going to come back. Or commenting on Facebook or scrolling because they're all addictions. So to heal these, we have to find peace and joy. That's the antidote to addiction and to being in the mind. It's to find peace of mind, and there's so many different ways we can do that. Like regulating our emotions, like breath work is really good. Meditation, movement, and strenuous exercise creates serotonin, which is more somatic, that keeps us in the body. Like that feels like we're actually here in life, compared to if you're on the internet, it's dopamine, and dopamine is a temporary fake drug of the mind. And because we're flooded with it, it creates a chemical imbalance and addiction. It's dopamine. Then we move on to water. I find water, this is the most profound one, is because water is our emotions. It's our emotional health. So when we're healing our emotional health, we're healing everything. Your emotions affect everything, and if they're not dealt with, they can lead to disease, because it creates inflammation. It's like trying to lock a screaming kid, a part of you in a cage, or an angry man is going to create a racket and create instability, and you're going to hear that and you're going to feel that. And this is what the ego does. If the more you suppress your ego, the more you suppress shame, the more ill you become. And you can see this in different forms of disease. I'll just use a really basic one. The eczema. eczema, inflammation of the skin. It means something is trying to get out. And one I learned on my journey is when somebody has bad teeth and their teeth are falling out, that's from continuous lies. But teeth are to do with time as well. So there's all this karmic entanglement to do with time and healing, and I'm not going to go into that because that's a bit more advanced at this stage. So I'm just going to concentrate on the fact that water is emotion, and water holds memory because water is consciousness, because the spirit of water moves through us. So if you're aware of the science of water, I forget the name of the doctor. I should have wrote it down. Did loads of experiments on speaking to water and how that affects the structure of the water. If you say nasty words to it, it falls apart. If you say nice words to it, it forms beautiful crystalline structures. And it's the same in your body. So if you're speaking nasty words to yourself, it can make you ill because it can affect the water in your body. And it's the same if you hear nasty words or say nasty words to someone else, because it doesn't matter if you're saying those words to yourself or to someone else, they're both going to affect you negatively. That's why speaking nice words out loud to yourself, self-recognition, are really powerful forms of healing. So you have to heal the water in your body. So the third element is earth, and this is more akin to nourishment. It's about nourishing your body, nutrition, watering the body with pure consciousness and making sure you're putting pure water and pure food, and planting seeds of love, watching yourself grow and bloom, staying grounded, those kind of things. Because the dangers of eating poor food are just, it's really easy to do that. Eating more green food is more homegrown food with your own hands and more homemade meals is actually you putting more love into your body. Like I started doing that as part of my integration a few years ago, and the difference is astronomical. If you really feel what it feels like in your stomach after you've eaten something you made, you feel compassion and charge and love. It really makes a dramatic change. Whereas supermarket food and meat, I mean, they're so contaminated with so much crap. It's unbelievable. Like I went to the supermarket the other day and I was just reading the ingredients and it made me so angry, right? You get all these frozen fish and it gives you a percentage of how much of it is actually fish. And the highest percentage I could find was like 67% or something. And you even find it in you even find they put sugar in everything, like smoked salmon, they put sugar on it to preserve it. And I've said this before, sugar is like it's an addiction that comes from a slavery because all addiction is a form of slavery. And so we've got these choices of all these contaminated different products which are designed to make us ill, so that we put more money into the system. It's designed to keep us ignorant, complaining. It's designed to keep us slow and ill, so that we give money to the pharmaceutical industry. So earth is a really powerful form of healing when you can heal the earth inside you because the body is made from earth, it comes from the earth. And also, earth is about purpose, knowing your purpose here on earth. People talk about being a star seed from on another planet, but you're a star seed here. You're a star seed here. Be present here. Do your job here. Stop trying to be up there in the mind. And I'm speaking from experience because that's what I've had to do. We move on to fire. Fire is really important because fire is it's power, it's transmutation, it's grace, it's creation, it's your physical health and the action and movement. And that fire and transmutation are needed for the body to move, to digest. It's also about passion and life force, the creative force of life needed to make all your dreams come true. And all of these are linked. And the fifth element, if you've seen the movie, is spirit, which is love. It's love consciousness, the consciousness of love. Everything originates from your spirit because it is your soul and it is love, and healing the soul is the game. To heal love, you have to heal your soul, and that is the path of healing and ascension and enlightenment, actually. That to love yourself first before you can love another. But saying that, the process that I went through is I met my partner as a friend first because true love comes through true friendship. And it was a wish I actually made before I got into that. Before I even knew she existed, I said to myself, the next partner I want to be my last partner, and I want to know her as a friend first. And that's exactly what happened. And it really helps move through a lot of healing of judgments and etc. etc. If you are focused on that without judgment because you're friends first. Whereas if you found out about those things, had you been together in a love, a loving making love in a relationship, a more sexual based relationship, which is how most relationships start, then you may have some heavy judgments like, oh, and I didn't know about that. If I'd known that about you, I wouldn't have done this, this, or that. So it's better to start as friends first because as friends, you don't make judgments on each other. At least that's what true friendship is supposed to be. And all of these five elements, all these aspects of health are interconnected, and in and they can all affect each other in one area or another. Now, the way I work with spirit first. I work with spirit first to understand the core origin of what needs to be healed. And then I work emotionally, physically, and the integration of moving through that involves all of those other five elements. But what I find difficult is if there's too much ego surfacing, then you can spend too much mind in the air, which is the mind. Because when toxic shame comes up to be healed, to be noticed, like I said, it can push you out of the heart and into the mind. Number three, methods and techniques. So I went through so much trauma in my life, and it required a lot of deep healing and deep acknowledgement. But to just give you an oversight, an overview of the main aspects of healing, is there are truly three pillars of health. There's nutrition, sleep or rest, and exercise or movement. And when you incorporate those three elements into your daily life, you can transform yourself immediately. But like I said, I went through a lot in my life, and depending on the level of trauma in your life or the level of unconsciousness, you may need to try different methods. Now, I'm just going to reel off some of the methods I tried in order to get where I am today. So, after breaking my addictions and during, actually, this happened during as well, but I did break them: alcohol, drugs, really crap food like, pizza, ice cream, all that stuff to fill the hole of the shame in me. I tried everything that I could think of to get me to the next level of healing. So I'm just going to list them out here, written some down. I can't remember all of them, but meditation, goal setting exercises, yoga, Pilates, prescribed medication, several different martial arts, stellate ganglion block injections. That was one of the worst things I've ever done. Peptide injections, biohacking, my health and diet, nootropics, light therapies, posture correction, swimming, cold water therapies, Wim Hof breathwork, calisthenics, running, hiking across the Alps, psychotherapies, self-help books, journaling, online courses, life coaching, traveling around the world, plant medicine, and so much more. And each time I tried something new, I learned something new, and I put that like in my medicine pouch that I could use that would work for me. It's like, I always use the analogy of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee learned loads of different martial arts, and he took what he needed from each one and created his own system. That's what I've done for my own healing. I created my own healing system with divine intuition. So it's not something I just made up. I worked in alignment, in co-creation with my partner, so with the feminine and spirit. And spirit is like the third part. When two come together in divine union, you work together with spirit, which means you work with all of creation. And being guided by spirit, you I couldn't have done it without that. I couldn't have got this far without spirit because you need divine guidance. Everyone does. And divine guidance can come from the soul, yeah, but what if you can't speak to your soul? What if you have blockages? And this is why healing is needed. Step four of healing, killing the ego. So I've done an incredible video on this. I won't go into too much detail here about what the ego is and how to heal it. But healing really focuses around healing separation, and the ego is it is the king of separation, really. It's not, I wouldn't call it a king, but it is the what is it they call it? The great separator, yeah. And when you know that, you know that the ego is the opposite of love in every scenario. It promotes separation, so all you have to do is do the opposite. And that's easier said than done, of course. That's why it requires awareness. And so most of healing is about developing awareness. And when you chip away at the shame and all the darker emotions, you start to become more and more aware because you unlock more of your DNA. And healing is the healing of the DNA. And there's so much depth to this. There's so much depth because when you understand that the ego is trying to create separation, you're trying to bring yourself together, you wonder, well, how is that done? And the way it's done is if you imagine, and I've done a video on this called about the antidote to devil worship. If you imagine the ego as I mean, it comes in many different forms, but we create it and we become it. And when we create, let's say, the devil, if the ego is the devil, and I'll give you a really good example actually. When I remember the time when I chose to betray myself, I was just a young kid and I was getting beaten mercilessly on a daily basis. I was only about 5 or 6. I must have been about actually 6 or 7. And I remember I was just getting beaten and beaten and beaten, and I was unable to protect myself because my abuser was older and bigger than me. And I remember making the conscious decision, and I didn't remember this until I was in my healing journey, so it brought it up. I remember saying, in order to beat them, in order to beat this person, I have to become that which I hate. And so I had to defend myself and fight back. And because I wasn't taught at such a young age how to fight back by being myself, by being because I was getting beaten for being myself, or just getting beaten for being loving, being a really cute and loving kid. But I was being beaten out of jealousy. And we're not taught at such a young age how to defend ourselves without physical violence. And so when I chose that, I became part of that world. And that creates an enormous amount of shame, and it creates a branch of narcissistic behavior. And these are all behaviors that we learn, they're not ours. So when you constantly acknowledge that they're not ours, but you have to take responsibility for it, you can heal anything. And I always say this in all my videos. When we understand shame, we just realize that it's an illusion that kind of says, no, you can't come in the heart. And you're like, yes, I can. It's my heart. Get out of the way. And the impact of not dealing with our shame can create so much density that we feel like life just isn't worth living. And with everything that's going on in the world, what we're taught is that love is the enemy. And when a society is based on fear and love comes in, it's like, oh no, it's love, like that. And that's kind of how the ego makes us behave, because when we are loving to ourselves, it kills the ego. Because if the ego is shame, if the ego is separation, and love is wholeness and oneness, it destroys it. And so the key to healing is, of course, yeah, love. But love's such a big word. how do you grasp that meaning? And so you have to think about the different forms of healing and the different forms of love, because the different forms of love are healing. So, like I said, self-recognition, that's a brand of love. That's a kind of love. Devotion, that's a kind of love. Courage, that's a kind of love. So love is like the umbrella for healing. And the pathway that opens up to healing, the pathway to healing is first comes from acknowledgement. And this is where I get on to number five, the secret of healing all wounds, including narcissism, and separation. So the secret of healing all wounds and the path to enlightenment essentially is acknowledgement and responsibility with action. This is how I work. This is the integration that I work with, the integration coaching that I offer. And so first, I need to explain to you what is acknowledgement. So acknowledgement is essentially the antidote to judgment. So judgment comes from a place of guilt and innocence, right and wrong, black and white. There's no such thing as right and wrong, only opinion. So acknowledgement, what it is, it's like I always use this example of Jesus, right? Imagine Jesus walking through crowds of people, and someone reaches out and go, "Hey, Jesus, I'm a big fan," right? He could ignore them and keep walking, or he could go, "Oh, hello, what's your name? How can I help you? Thank you for being a fan," right? That's acknowledgement. And that person that received that acknowledgement from Jesus would receive a lot of love, right? But if he'd have walked off, they'd be like, "Oh God, Jesus, he's not all he's cooked up to be, is he?" You know, just using a humorous example of how acknowledgement can embody itself. And so that how that works when you're healing, you could be having a bad day, or let's just use a really common one, having an argument with your partner about the dishes, right? And you can say, I acknowledge that I didn't do the dishes last night. I apologize. That's a really simple one, right? Okay. And then the responsibility would be, I'm sorry. And then to take action, then you would change that behavior. That's a really simple one. When we get into the deep ones, you can acknowledge that. So I went through this path. When I first met my partner, she couldn't believe it. That a man turned up on her door and said, "I'm a narcissist. I acknowledge that I have narcissistic behavior, and I'm here to listen to you to understand how I can heal that." And that's a huge acknowledgement. And we're taught not to do that because it's shameful. But like I said, always go the opposite direction to the ego. It's not shameful at all. It's absolutely delightfully loving to yourself to acknowledge that, because as soon as you acknowledge it, it comes up to be seen, it comes out, and you can heal it. Because acknowledgement is the giving of love. When you acknowledge someone, they feel better because you're giving them love. And it's the same about, if you the parts of yourself. You acknowledge those parts of yourself. You acknowledge the truth that there's something there to be healed instead of just ignoring it, being ignorant. Taking responsibility is the difficult part, and then taking action. And this is why I offer plant medicine integration as one of my coaching services, but I offer all different types of coaching service to help guide people who don't know the way. Thesacredrainbowwarrior.com. And acknowledgement is the pathway to enlightenment, because when we acknowledge our path, we acknowledge our purpose, we acknowledge each other, we acknowledge our part in all of this. It's it's really divine, and it's the key. It's the key to acknowledge that you don't know, to acknowledge that you do know. Acknowledgement is the key. It's the key to your heart. It's the key to healing. It's the key to everything. So there you go. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.